When I was young, around middle school, my parents made a very big decision for me. It's the kind of decision that a parent makes when they think that's for the best thing for their child, when really it wasn't. This decision that I'd rather not talk about had ultimately turned me into a social outcast. It ruined me. Under normal circumstances, I would do something along the lines of watch something good on TV, listen to some good music, get myself something good to eat, and if I was feeling bad, I immediately would feel better afterwards. But this decision ultimately broke me. It got me in a bad way with some bad students and even worse excuses for faculty. And up until my senior year of high school, I had to deal with all that nonsense. And through it all, I was never taken seriously as an individual. I said stuff along the lines of, there was one jerk who once said that there are people who could be in the stands who could do better than I could. I was told all the time that, I'm never gonna, get a girlfriend or be happy or any of that from a lot of people. It both overwhelmed me and it broke me. Now, I've said this before in these videos that I'm Catholic. And the one thing that Catholics really are against, well, not the one thing, but they're against. I'm trying to get to. This is really hard for me to do, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. Suicide is something that Catholics are completely and utterly against. So even though I contemplated it, I told myself that I would never do it. And keep in mind, this was a pretty hard time in my life for me. I mean, I got so depressed and so sad that, I would go to high school dances and, being the gentleman that I am, I would, ask a girl to dance and, they would say yes. But it got me thinking, did they say yes because it was out of pity? Or was it because they legitimately wanted to? And by the way, any all girls who I'm referring to in that scenario, if you said yes for the sake of saying yes, thank you. That actually makes me feel better. So, after I would graduate from Horseheads, I would go to college, get myself someplace to live, and live out the rest of my days in solitude. Everyone was telling me that I'd never find a girlfriend and get married, so might as well fulfill that prophecy, right? And then my parents suggested what I thought at the time was the most ridiculous thing they had ever brought up. And that was when they suggested I repeat my senior year at Trinity Pauling, which is an all-boys school. It was ridiculous at the time because I could not be any more depressed than I was at that point in time. I was sick of school. I wanted nothing more to do with anyone. That was it. Again, I was going to go to college, get a degree, and live out the rest of my days in solitude. I say solitude. I still probably would have interacted with people. Just, I really wouldn't go out and, do much. My point is, I'm already depressed as it is. And now you're suggesting that I not only be in school for 1 year longer than I really want to be, but now it's at an all-boys school? I mean, I was getting rejected by girls I asked out at Horseheads, but at least that was a numbers game. I don't even have that luxury at Trinity Pauling. I mean, in my time at Horseheads, only one girl I ever asked to junior prom said yes. And that girl was nothing short of a saint. So I thought, you know what? I'll go to Trinity Pauling just because maybe if I ever see that girl ever again, maybe I'll actually come back to someone who's, worthy of her. And to possibly kick the ass of the guy who said that people in the stands would do better than I would. He was a pretty big rival for me. But, yeah. I knew it was never really going to happen, but I still had that sort of slight optimism that anyone who knew me then I had known me for, or whatever. You get what I mean. So, you guys at this point know this part of the story. On Tuesday, December 2nd, 2009, I went to Trinity Pauling, and in my mind, I knew at some point I was actually going to commit suicide. The only question was, when was I going to do it? I mentioned how on my way up to Trinity Pauling for the first time when the year started, that my grandmother called me, and I began to cry. And it was because I thought it'd be the last time I'd ever hear her voice. So, I get to Trinity Pauling, and quite fortuitously enough, between running cross country, preparing for the fall production of Black Comedy that year, and obviously trying to be a good student and getting all my work done, I was actually so incredibly busy that days would go by and I completely forgot what my objective was in terms of committing suicide, that is. And funny enough, I actually got rewarded for my hard work that fall. I was given great recognition among my peers for Black Comedy, and I ended up winning, the Sean McCabe Award for all my excellence and hard work. Through it all, I think that crowning achievement was, before I received the award, my cross-country coach, who was one of the 16 of the right. In fact, specifically, he's GC on here, the very top one. He said that if I had 7 guys with Nick Cutler's hard work and dedication, we'd win everything no matter what. I never got a thing of that at Horseheads at all, by the way. And even though I got, recognition among my peers, I told myself, this isn't going to last. At some point, these guys are going to completely forget what you did. And they'll, toss you to the wayside. So at that time, I had ultimately decided when I was going to commit suicide, which would have been after we got back from winter break. So at some point in January of 2009. It would have given me one last Christmas with the family. And, my birthday is December 28th, so we would have been celebrating me turning 19 at the time. Give me an opportunity to tell my mother and father that, I love them and see my family, all that good stuff. And when I would get back to Trinity Pauling, I was gonna do the deed, if you will. Hey, I'm just saying, that pond wasn't frozen yet. Not to mention, Cluett Building's pretty tall. So at this point, you guys are all probably wondering, what made you change your mind? What happened that made you think, maybe life really is worth living for, maybe you should stick it out and, see what happens next? Well, it happened on this day, 10 years ago. I will never forget that day. It was the weekend that the Trinity Pauling wrestling team, which, that's what I went to Trinity Pauling for, mostly was for wrestling. We went to the Loomis Chaffee dual meet tournament. And it was the day my father got to see me wrestle for Trinity Pauling for the first time. I actually ended up beating a kid who, the week before, beat me in sudden death. So, I got my revenge, if you will. Actually, I really shouldn't say that. That kid ended up being a really sweet guy. And so my father took me back to Trinity Pauling all the way from Loomis. And we went to a Putnam Diner for dinner, which is a really good place to get, which I've said before, is a diner that serves like breakfast all day and serves really good food, and I do highly recommend you go there if you get an opportunity. In fact, it's actually on my bucket list to go there again one day. We have a nice dinner, and I was going to see my father the next day, and this is actually right before we went home for winter break, by the way. I'd see my father the next day, spend the day, and then he'd head home and get everything prepared for when I arrived in what would have been 3 days from then. And then it happened. The next morning, I had gotten up early and, just waiting for my father to arrive, so we can do stuff together. And all of a sudden, my dorm parent tells me that we need to head for the chapel, which at the time surprised me because I knew for a fact that for this particular weekend, we weren't going to have any Sunday chapel service. So I go to the chapel, sit down in my usual spot, which is near the front, and then I look to my left, and a friend of mine who was actually a really good lacrosse player from Canada, and he was actually in my theater arts class, he's sitting next to me with a very vacant expression on his face, like he had just seen a ghost. And understand, this guy was naturally pretty, pale looking, but he looked even more pale than usual. And then in walks our headmaster. And he gave a little speech, and he ultimately said what had happened. And what ended up happening was one of our brothers had committed suicide. His name was Andrew Einstein. And if any of you would think that name sounds familiar, that's because, hold on a second. He is, sorry, hold on, I'm trying to do this correctly. He is, this individual right here. AE. That's what Andrew Einstein was. Yes. Andrew Einstein is one of the 16 of the left. And he is one of 16 people who I look to when I need to dig deep for strength. Now, I said this earlier, but at the time, I told myself, you wait and see. This is going to be right before winter break starts. We're going to be away for 3 weeks, and everyone's going to completely forget about this and throw it to the wayside, and that's only going to be, my turn to do it when we get back. Pretty much the same mentality I had after I won the Sean McCabe Award, where even though I was proud of what I'd done between that and black comedy, I told myself, it's not going to last. So, a day goes by, and then we have a really big chapel funeral service for Andrew. His mother and father drove all the way up from South Carolina to be there. And it was actually interesting because not only did we have our school's priest, Father Gedrick, but we also had a rabbi come because Andrew's mother is Episcopalian and his father is Jewish, which I thought was interesting. If you had told me what had happened next after his passing, there's no way I would have believed you. Because, and I really should have seen this, I actually arrived at Trinity Poly a few days before Andrew did. And he actually ended up starting cross country later than I did. And he was already in the top 2 or 3, where I was just barely making the top 7. And Andrew was also a lacrosse player too. And lacrosse was huge at Trinity Poly around that time. To the point where it got pretty annoying. I just told you what my story was. At that time, I thought I had every right to commit suicide in comparison. Yet I was still standing. What happened after that service was, my brothers all came together. And we had each other's backs that day. There was nary, a dry eye in the house. There were guys who were bigger than I was, and they were hugging and they were crying. And then I thought 2 things to myself right away. And that was, first of all, if it had been me who had gone, would I have elicited that kind of reaction? Considering all the hard work I had put in myself and the relative name I made for myself at Trinity Poly? And at that time, I didn't know. And the other thing I thought to myself is, you know what? That's something that I am never going to know. Because though Andrew Einstein had died, he saved my life. My brothers saved my life. Through their collective unity and just sticking together around that holiday season. I knew then and there that I couldn't do it to them. I simply couldn't. So, I told myself I wasn't going to do it. And I haven't done it, and I haven't even thought of it since. Oh, I thought of doing it, I mean, I have to live with the burden that I still thought about it, and I almost did it myself. Which could never even have the magnitude of actually doing the deed. But I still feel it's pretty bad. I have spent the last 10 years not having a clue what the hell I'm doing. And if you think that these last 10 years have been great, I assure you that is not the case at all. You know, I mentioned a while back that one of my brothers and I ended up hating each other when we graduated. And we only made up after another one of our brothers had passed away 4 years and 6 days later on December 20th, 2012. His name was Sean Bertanza. And if that name sounds familiar as well, yep. So there. You now know two individuals who are on the 16 of the left. Whenever I do any sort of competition or any sort of event, I write both Andrew Einstein's and Sean Bertanza's initials on my left forearm, so I know that I need to so I can look at them and I can dig deep for strength. And to this day, I still do it. But again, I could do an entire series of videos as to just how incredibly awful these last 10 years have been. I could. But I'm not going to bring up any bad memories. That's certainly not something that I want to talk about. And plus, do you guys really want to hear about any of that? I don't think so. So, as much as I want to say that there's been some pretty damn awful things that have happened over these last 10 years, there have been some pretty damn good things too. You know, I got to live long enough to see not one, not two, but 3 Avengers movies, with a 4th one coming out this April. I had the opportunity to train and compete in 4 marathons. I got to witness my brother get engaged. And not only did I see him get married, I was part of that wedding. Although to this day I still have reservations about what my specific role in that wedding was. But, you know, I got to be there. I got to know the fact that a girl I knew since elementary school and a guy I knew doing Big Flats Youth League basketball got together, got married, and now they have a kid. And you know what? That damn good is just the tip of the iceberg. I said earlier that I spent the last 10 years not having a clue what the hell I'm doing. Outside of the fact that I went to college and got myself a bachelor's degree in health sciences. But you know what? I'm alive to be able to say that. And I'm able to dig deep for strength every day, knowing that as bad as things are, I look to both Andrew and Sean for strength. You know, it's hard. It is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that life is, great. Because it isn't. Through all of this, I came to the conclusion that if life had a flavor, if you will, it would be bittersweet. Because again, for every bad thing that happens, I like to believe there's some good as well. As for what happened with both Andrew and Sean, with Andrew, he actually had a giant service for him in the state of South Carolina. In fact, from what I heard, the government of South Carolina actually came to see him. And later on that year at Trinity Pauling, his parents actually came up and talked to us some more. And what Andrew's father said really spoke to me. And only further vindicated that I made the right choice in not committing suicide myself. And I knew that. And of course I'm not naive enough to know that I'm going to live forever. Of course I'm going to die. We all are. That's just a fact of life. So, you can imagine just how completely heartbroken I was on December 20th, 2012, when I found out that Sean died. I knew that another one of my brothers was going to pass on, but I didn't think it'd be that soon. Regardless of what ends up happening, I know that for the sake of my brothers, I move forward and I choose to live every single day. So, if any of my brothers are watching this, thank you for everything. I want to specify one thing. I'm not going to... if I didn't commit suicide, then I'm not going to do it now. I'm not going anywhere. That's another thing I'm grateful that I'm alive to be able to do. I'm able to make these videos. I've been doing this for 348 days straight, and I'm not going to stop. I couldn't stop if I tried. And yeah, there's some things in life that still really aren't going well for me. I'm still single. And that's, I'd say more, but at that point it'd be, TMI. But that's about all I have to say on that matter. Normally this is the part where I would say, to like, favorite, share, subscribe, follow me on social media platforms, and I say how humbled I am this video was made. I'm hoping we have a wonderful day, and you guys know the rest. But today, I want to say this. Well, I want to say two things. The first, that is actually on my bucket list to visit both Andrew Einstein's and Sean Bertanza's grave sites. Because there's something that I always wanted to be able to say. And that saying is actually a blessing that to this day I have memorized. And that is, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall softly on your fields. And until we meet again, in the next life, my brothers. May the Lord hold you in the palm of his hand. And now all that's left to say is that I am beyond humbled that I was able to get this off my chest and explain my story. And I'm hopeful that all who hear this take this message. Use it to move forward with your life. And know that there is always something beautiful on the horizon for you. And always remember that if there's ever a problem, if you need someone to talk to, please come to me. Because I've been there too. And while the way I got out of it really isn't that great of a thing, I'm still able to say that because I understand how beautiful life is. And as bad as things can get, I know for a fact that overall, life is pretty damn beautiful. Thank you.